Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar hosted and convened by South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. My name is Furqan Ahmed, and I have an absolute pleasure and honor to be moderating this amazing webinar. The theme of the discussion today is the impact of social and educational discrimination on religious minorities in South Asia and its effects and beyond. And we will also be exploring its challenges and solutions as well. So this is a topic of critical importance in today's socioeconomic landscape, and we are truly honored to have the distinguished experts with us who will share their valuable insights and their viewpoints on the theme today. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our eminent speakers today. Firstly, we are truly grateful once again, Dr. George, who is a renowned activist, author, and an academician from India, whose extensive work on social justice and minority rights has been recognized not only in South Asia, but it has been recognized internationally. And on the other side, we are joined by Mr. Usman Shamim, who is a Commonwealth Chair Fellow and who's currently placed as a lecturer in politics and peace studies at the University of Okara from Pakistan, whose research focuses on governance, minority rights, and peace building. So, like I said, today we are truly honored to have you with us today. So, Dr. George, I would be handing over the mic to you to have your views.
Good evening, everybody, and it's wonderful. And I thank Mr. Furqan Ahmed of SARIM, and I also thank everybody in SARIM for organizing a webinar on such an important topic. I would like to use the PowerPoint, and I would come up with a PowerPoint presentation. I hope it is viewable. So the topic that we are discussing today is the impact of social and educational discrimination on religious minorities in South Asia and beyond. So I'm just trying to look at it from the Indian perspective. I may not get too much into the whole of the world because my world of understanding is pretty limited. Even to understand India as a whole is not a possible option. Yet I'm trying to look at it and trying to bring in some perspectives for a discussion. So yes, so as we move, I would like to look at, the whole notion of how this, I'm going to put a few pictures, how it's people across the world, not just in India, perhaps the whole of the world, not just in South Asia, but all of the world, people are discriminated and they're dismissed and distorted. So just a few pictorial examples, how things happen when there is war, where particularly we have been witnessing for the last 3 to 4 months, there's almost a global war going on in Asia and surrounding areas. So this would be like, this is something which is going on. There are creation of slums that you can see from the second picture on the screen, on the right of the screen. And the one which you see is also kind of a distorted, destructive place where people are getting displaced. So there is discrimination that we see in day-to-day life. And it's specifically when we talk about South Asia, there are questions of Dalits, there are questions of tribal lives, and at the global level, the questions of racism that we see on an everyday basis. What's actually happening? There is a lot of things that's happening in the current phase. There's one thing what is happening is the act of twisting and altering some of the historical informations, and some of the truth has been twisted and altered. So what is natural and original is being now twisted, and it's misleading and giving a wrong impression. So when you get a wrong impression, what happens is that the more you keep on telling lies, the more you are making a state of lie as true. The more you keep on saying the same lie again and again and again. For example, a person who is not a thief, if you keep on telling you are the thief, eventually he starts to feel, or he imbibes that, yes, I am the thief. And he says, I am the one who have stolen certain things from. So there is a forced change to to change the actual true meaning of something that is going on in this current phase of history. And the fourth change is the change change the original and natural state of something. So anything which is not normal and natural, anything that has not evolved or emerged, and that is what is currently happening in the distorted discriminatory phase, particularly when we talk about education. I want to quickly move on to a few people from the Indian context who have spoken extensively and worked extensively on education. Let's look at the example of what Mahatma Jyotirao Phule says. He says, without education, the wisdom was lost. He originally said this in Marathi, which I have actually translated. Without education, wisdom was lost. Without wisdom, morals were lost. Without morals, development was lost. Without development, wealth was lost. Without wealth, the Shudras were ruined. So much has happened through the lack of education. That's what Mahatma Phule has said. And let's go to another personality who is Jyotiba Phule, Savitribai Phule. Now she's telling in one of her writings, she's saying, go get educated, be self-reliant, be industrious, work, gather wisdom and riches. All gets lost without knowledge. We become animal without wisdom. Sit idle no more. Go get educated, get education, and misery of the oppressed and forsaken. You've got a golden chance to learn. So learn and break the chains of caste. Throw away the Brahmin scriptures fast. Now there is this operation that we have at present, particularly in the South Indian, in the South Asian context. It has also to do with the legacy of a social system that has existed for over 3,500 years. Now let's look at one of the founding fathers of India. And he says freedom of mind is a real education. So a person whose mind is not free, though he may not be in chains, is a slave, not a free man. One whose mind is not free, though he may not be in prison, is a prisoner and not a free man. One whose mind is not free, though alive, is no better than dead. Freedom of mind is a proof of one's existence. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Now he goes on to say like this, the progress of any society depends on the progress of education in that society. So this is the way that education needs to be looked upon, and where there is education and discrimination that gets combined into the context, particularly in India and at large in the South Asian context. So how do we look at it? What actually needs to happen is the cultivation of mind. That should be the ultimate aim of human existence. Now, what are the real objectives if you look at education? Think critically, think intensively. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. Education must enable to discern the truth from false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from fictions. So let's look at what is basically, who is saying this? This is said by none but, the one and only Martin Luther King. So we have a global perspective, we have a Asian perspective, we have a pan-South Asian perspective, and we have an Indian perspective of how and what the real education should be. Let's have a look at another person who is also known as a person who has built, a pedagogy of education. Here, education does not change the world. Education changes people, and people change the world. So the transformation happens through the transfer of knowledge. And when he says education is freedom, education is liberation, cultivate critical consciousness in education, then education is revolution. And he wrote the most popular book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That's Paulo Freire. So when we look at the education and discrimination, there is a case of India where it is distorted. It's distorting the whole of education. And how does it distort? There's a social distortion, there's a cultural distortion, there's an economic distortion, and there's a political distortion. So there's a chain of distortions that happens. So it's not just one dimensional, it's multi-dimensional that this distortion happens. Now there's a new, the education system, which is now attacking the Indian education system. I'll talk about it. Now when we look at education, what does it actually brings in? We need to understand what is now happening is there's a new language, a new philosophy, and a new ideology. There are new rules, new laws, new policies, and new principles that is coming into existence. The question still remains, is it what we call it as a secular democratic polity, particularly in democratic states like India? Now, I think it is not just an isolated, attack, but it is part of a larger attack on the Indian secular democratic polity. And it's an attack on the idea of justice, freedom, equality, and fraternity. And in India, RSS, organization like RSS is the kingpin body, with all other bodies becoming part of the larger Sangha Parivar. And the first attack of theirs is on the constitution. They are in the process of creating a different India, a different nationhood. So no more the education in the present India is for the liberation. It is not for liberative wisdom. It is not for self-respect. It is not for freedom of mind. It's not for critical thinking. It is not for revolution. So this is what education should be. As we have looked at the case studies of people like Mahatma Phule, people like Savitribai Phule, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Dr. Martin Luther King, Paulo Freire, but now it is no more under going to be the case. Education system in India is completely under a thorough attack. Now, the education is supposed to be a key to orient the young minds, but now it is, in a way, it is disorienting the same young minds. Now, India is in a phase of project fascism. I think this is a world issue. It's not just India. There's a project fascism across the world, and in India, it is the Hindutva. Now, what is it? Saffronization of knowledge, saffronization of institutions. All government bodies are saffronized. Recently, we saw the elections happening in 5 states. Out of that, you can see how there was a real struggle and entangling of people by institutions like the Election Commission through a systematic process called special intensive review, which was basically to disenfranchise a large section of Indian population from their right to vote during the elections. So you can see how even the courts are becoming pretty much saffronized. The Indian courts are becoming saffronized. The enforcement directorate is becoming saffronized. You can see one of how every institution, every body in this country is being saffronized. Legislative is saffronized. Executive is being saffronized. Governance is being saffronized. Judiciary is being saffronized. And saffron is becoming the color. You can see how saffron color is also being so much popularized. Even on, sometimes you will see on the Indian jerseys of the players that they play, when they play hockey, it is saffron in color. When it was actually blue, we were known as the men in blue, whether it's cricket or hockey or soccer or any game, even now it is all becoming saffron. And this is becoming the ideology, and the mood is shifting now. Saffron is everywhere and everything is saffron. And today everything is also shifting. The language is shifting. There's a language of saffron coming. India is no more actually represented as India anywhere now in the national forums. They're using the term, specifically they're using Bharat. They're not even using Hindustan, because when you use the term Hindustan, it may have some sthan which is making it more difficult to accept, because there is Pakistan, there is Uzbekistan, there are so many nations with the suffix Than. So they are not using it. Now they're using it Bharat. They're using all Hindi names for the ministry. So the language is changing. There's no more English being used, although English is the official language of the center, one of the 2 official languages of the center. Now they are avoiding English nomenclatures. So these signs and symbols could be seen from the changes in the name of ministries. So we don't have a defense ministry, we have a Raksha Mantralaya. We don't have a health ministry, we have a Arogya, which is more like Ayushman Mantralaya. So you can see the nomenclatures being changed. We don't have we don't have the home ministry. It is like a Grah Mantralaya. So that home ministry, we don't have the All India Radio. That we used to have the All India Radio for several decades. We had it. Now it is only Akashvani. Even when they used to do the English news, they used to say this is All India Radio, and for the Hindi news, they used to say "Ye Akashwani hai." So now it is say they say is this is Akashwani, and the news is read by so and so. So that's the way the language is changing, the codification is changing, and promoting Hindutva, Hinduized media. We can see so much of Hindutva and Hinduized media, and open support to pro-Hindu Rashtra industrial houses. The example is Ambani, Adani, and they took over from industries to land to resources to public amenities to educational institutions to civil society spaces. Now there is no real civil society in India. It's all the saffronized Hindutvaized civil society in India. So that is the current state in India. Now Hindutva is a common buzzword today. Hindu, Hindutva, Hinduism, Hindi, Hindustan. So that is the nomenclature, how it is going. Now, education is being used as a conversion or strategy from a democratic secular India to a Hindu Rashtra. This is a poster where it is a poster in West Bengal where the in the prayer room of the RSS school, with the prayer room of a school, the RSS had prescribed prayer posters are there which describes Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikh literature as part of the Hindu legacy, but there is no mention of Islam or Christianity. So in that prayer, they are using these three religions, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, as part of the larger Hindu family. So in principle, this whole discrimination or distortion starts with twisting and altering of the truth. Hinduization began with the saffronization of Islamic history in India. So history of Islam in India is being rewritten, and Hinduization continues with the glorification of Sanatana history and culture, including Varnashram Dharma. So there is nothing bad in the caste system. There's nothing bad in Hindu religion. Even to the extent you can see how they have deleted the Mughal history from Indian textbooks. All other religions like Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism are extensions of Hinduism. And Indian school is becoming more popular in the past 1 decade, which otherwise was a government school, Indic school. I assume you know what is Indic school. Indic school is basically very popular now in Western universities, which has a one-point agenda to defend Hinduism in any way and any form. So when you talk about Varnashram and casteism, they start defending it from Advaita Siddhanta and other principles and policies. So now they are becoming very popular in the last one and a half decade, which otherwise was a dormant school in the Western universities. Now discrimination is basically, in a way, it is strategizing, education for the Hindu Rashtra. How discrimination is being strategized through education. Now the strategies is clear: to repeat the lies unless everyone forgets the truth. So, you keep on repeating the lies until everybody forgets the real truth. And there is a BSNA, that is Bharatiya Shiksha Nyaya Adhiniyam, which is basically upturning the Indian education policy and institutions, and a clear assault on the education. There is a distortion of Islamic history and heritage, and the class 12th history book, the Mughal history, is being completely deleted. And the Puritan Hindu image connecting with fiction, kind of a fictional pre-British high-class Hindu or upper-caste Hindu, is introduced to Hindu texts like Vedas. So now these texts are being introduced into Indian schools, like Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads, and even Manusmriti is being inducted into the school curriculum, consolidated saffronization. So this was a person by the name Savarkar when he was put in jail because he protested against the British. While in jail, he wrote an apology and he promised the British that he will never participate in any sort of a freedom movement. Now he is glorified at present as a national hero. For your information, he is the one who wrote a book by the name Essentials of Hindutva in 1933. And that's what lays the seeds of Hindu India, where he is using two key concepts of Pitra Bhu and Punya Bhu. that is the land of ancestors, the forefathers, and the land which is the holy land, the Punya Bhu is the Punya Bhumi, the holy land of the ancestors. Again, how policies are strategized, how policies are in the making of a saffronized fascist India. Now, centralization of education is becoming very fast, where in India, states had a certain uh, kind of right over the education policies and institution at the state level. Now, centralization is it becomes central in the policies, and they are actually becoming more intact at the present in the present state. Education in the current concurrent list. So the concurrent list is basically in a way limits the authority and power of the states, the provinces to do much on education. So in the 2020 National Education Policy, they have limited the entire policy from, and they gave almost zero rights to the states. The only right the states would have is to implement what the center says. So that is the right now. And there's an attack on the unity in the idea of unity in diversity in the name of uniformity. So it is in the name of uniformity this attack is going on. Now there is another process which is replacing education based on universal values to education based on caste and feudal values. And RSS textbooks are replaced in the school curriculum in the name of learning culture. They call it Sanskriti, Sanskriti learning. And there is something which RSS has brought out called Sanskriti Bodhmala. And now the national education system through open schooling, NIOS, National Open in the School, that NIOS is now adapting Sanskriti Bodhmala, and BJP-run states have already adapted the same in their state level open schooling system. So you can see education is in the making of a fascist India. So the Hindutva India is being made. So how is distorting the whole scene? So now what is being taught in many of the schools is like from atoms to aviation, everything is part of the glorious Hindu past. So there is no discovery like aviation, like atom, like what do you call, like aeroplanes or anything is not actually discovered by scientific means. It is there already in the Hindu scriptures. So this is actually distorting the young minds to transform these ideas. So earlier these ideas were actually somewhere at the fringes. Now it is now coming into center and it's becoming more mainstream. So the young minds are having, now these young minds are now through different forms of social media, through WhatsApp, through Instagram, they are actually made to believe that these are things that we already have in our past, in our glow. So this is the glorious past. This is a glorified past, that these all things have been there in our past. Our rishis and maharshis, our saints and hermits have discovered it long before. Why should we take it from the Western minds? So this is a very clear strategy of attacking the education. Now we need to also understand the institutions like NCERT, UGC, Indian Council of Social Science Research, Indian Council of Historical Research, Indian Council of Scientific Research. So similarly, there are so many different institutions. Their roles are also being changed. So now myths are being floated. There are so many myths floated through the textbook and curriculums. Like for example, one of the books by Dinanath, in which there is something called Pushpak Vimana. So that is basically the aviation technology. Then the plastic surgery of fixing the head of Ganesha, replacing, when his his throat was slit, Lord Shiva basically, slits the head of an elephant, baby elephant, and that's being fixed on. So that is being brought in as plastic surgery. And Canada's atom theory, and Bharadwaj's aeronautics. So you can see how this whole education and information and science and knowledge and wisdom is distorted to make a fascist India. Now, how the institutions are also distorted. I'll go quick. The National Testing Agency have come and their centralized exam system for the university enrollment. So now the states role in inducting students based on their localized culture, based on the localized expertise, or based on localized preferences, the preferences you give to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, the preferences you give to other backward classes, the preferences you give to the women, the preferences you give to minorities, that is being gone. There is no such space now because everything is now national. So you have to cross, or you have to actually pass the national testing agency's test. Otherwise, you are not eligible to be admitted into the university education. And similarly, you can see the states used to have a very subtle role in the appointment of VCs, and in the appointment of the VCs. And it was basically a more democratic process of there was a democratic committee consisting of people from multiple parties, and also consisting of people who are experts from education. Now that system is gone. Everything above, where the vice chancellors and teachers are appointed by the central government in the central universities, and in the state universities where the state government is supposed to appoint, they are not allowed to appoint because the governors would interfere into it, and governors would want their people to be appointed as vice chancellors and chancellors, or pro vice chancellors. Now there is a pressure to hold government sponsored program in education spaces. Now all education spaces are now, in a way or other, they have to sponsor, they have to adapt a certain program. Any, I mean, not any, but they have to adapt all the programs sponsored by the BJP central government, linking superstitions and rituals to university education. Now, this is like very funny. We never had a course like Vastu, astrology, rituals, and all. Now, these are being brought into university education. In a way, it's the creation of RSS shakas. The school is transformed into RSS shakas. There were RSS shakas in RSS schools earlier. Now, all the non-RSS schools are also being strategically converted into RSS shakas, Hindutva fascist imperialism under the grab of nationalism. That's what is happening in India. Now there are more fangs and chains, and there is no free ship, scholarship, and reservation in admission and appointments. Impact of recent laws and policies, for example, the CA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, the NRC, the recent SIR, the caste census, and these all are discriminating. These all are impacting the education. So you can see that there is a new form and pattern of discrimination that has surfaced. There are fake universities like the Geo University and Golgotha University, which has fallen recently in a big controversy, that has surfaced. We cannot see the women in this project. How about the anti-conversion drive against Christian? What about the Couchlandic group's attack on Muslims? RSS campaign on Christian tribals delisting, ban on Christian entry into villages, ban on Muslim traders. These are the fangs and chains and teeth that you see in the current face of India. Now there's a factory schooling. What is happening? What is factory schooling? You can see what the state wants is what you have to produce to the schools, colleges, and all educational institutions. If the state wants a fascist, product, the institution will have to produce a fascist student. So now, what is the education in the Naya Bharat's Bhakti model? This is it. So you put what you want, you actually have the result pre-decided. So you put what you want as an output. You put it. You want soldiers of RSS. You want soldiers of Hindutva. You put anybody into that will come out in that format. Now and this is actually the dream project that it wants. It's to establish the Brahminical Puritanism. It's to generate Puritan kings and princes and billions of Balis and Shambhuks and Ekavyas and Ravanas and Mahishasurs and Mahabalis and many other similar personalities of Hindu mythology. They will all come and have similar end and deaths. Earlier, those were just mythological, but this round, they want to create the real life persons in the real life stories. With this strategy in mind, education is being impacted. Yet, the question is, what The question is that, can we still think of a system based on absolute merit? And the absolute merit is basically what in this picture I'm trying to say. Everybody has a free and fair selection. Everybody has to take the same exam. So please, all the animals have to climb the tree. So this is a test that animals, when all different animals are supposed to climb the tree, and then you say that this is a fair and equal educational system, absolutely meritorious system. The question is, when there are existing inequalities between tribes and castes and minorities and majority, can we really have a system based on absolute merit? And in this system, the merit is not decided by those holding power and authority, but by those who are the victims of citadels of power. They will decide the criteria of merit. Finally, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to be countered and to be accounted. It's a struggle to collaborate. It's a struggle against the power system. It's a struggle for you to have opportunity. It's a struggle against gender discrimination. It's a struggle against race and racial discrimination. It's a struggle against the creation and recreation of new classes. It's a struggle against injustice. It's a struggle for justice. It's a struggle for equality. It's a struggle for access, diversity, inclusion, participation, and understanding.
Thank you so much, Dr. George, for sharing such an insightful knowledge and how you, I have to say, categorize the patronization or the pattern with which the education system is being hijacked in the current context. So thank you so much for such a detailed and profound presentation. So I know you are struggling in listening to what I'm saying. So I'll quickly move to our another speaker, Mr. Usman Siddiqui, who will be providing his insights on peace building, policy intervention, and potential solutions that can be mitigate these challenges for minorities in the region and beyond. Over to you, Usman.
Thank you, Furqan, and thank you for having me on your webinar. So these kinds of discussions actually provide a platform for practitioners and activists like Dr. George, who has rightly suggested some of the problems that Indian diaspora, Indian population, and the minorities in India are facing right now. So I'm really glad to hear from him in certain ways, and one of the ways that we have actually faced the similar problems during the 80s. So the problems that India is facing right now, the religification of the state, of such a massive state that only Muslim minority contains around 300 million inhabitants. So a country like that must be facing certain problems with these narrative settings and lies that are being spoken in order to implement and employ certain narratives and ideologies upon every minority. And since the minorities are such a large group themselves, it becomes very problematic it always demands some certain coercive techniques to implement, and people who are educated, they have certain abilities to comprehend these changes and reflect on them. But there are certain areas that where there is lack of education, and these less educated people basically fall into the trap, and these oppressive tendencies basically become coercive and consensual practices that take place in a society. So having said that, I would focus more on the issues that minorities are facing in Pakistan. So minorities in Pakistan are roughly around 2% of the total population, and that varies from what Indian minorities are in terms of their strength. And so Muslims roughly contain 14 to 15% of the entire India, and Hindus here in Pakistan are somewhere around 2% of the total population. And in terms of all the minorities combined in Pakistan, they are roughly around 8 to 9 million inhabitants. So and what we have witnessed in Pakistan during the last 40-50 years is that gradually we have learned our lessons religification of a diverse state with a diverse social background, ethnic background, and lingual background and religious backgrounds. There are certain experiments that cost more than what they provide. So, and because of the ongoing conflict with India, what has happened in Pakistan that our narratives have transformed, and they are now translated with the national cohesion, and national security becomes imperative. So these issues with minorities take a backstage, and they are seen as a subsystem of Pakistani social system. So they are less looked upon, and one of the reasons is that minorities, being in millions in Pakistan, they do not their voices are less heard, and they are not talked about as much as it could have been. So there's one more problem that even within one religion there are certain subcastes like Hindus in Pakistan. So among these 2.16% of the total population of Hindus, there's a considerable variation among those minorities as well. So Hindu minorities being roughly around 5.2 million in total. There is a considerable size that is upper caste, and then there's a division of lower caste Hindus as well, and they are scattered across regions as well. So, with regards to provincial statistics, they are separated by region and language, and they are separated by these caste structures. So they reside at different places in Pakistan, and they face different problems as compared to India, where there is a concentration of minorities with regards to region as well. So these types of problems that India faces are not faced by Pakistan, but there is still there are certain areas that need to be looked upon. One of the area is that diversity matters when opportunity becomes unequal. So this diversity has certain opportunities and challenges as well. So our literacy rates have gone up during the past decades as compared to as compared to 2 decades away. We were somewhere around 45-46% of the total literacy rate, and now the literacy rates have gone higher, somewhere around 63% in total. But that data does not represent the minorities in Pakistan. So there's less data that is available on minority education, like where they stand. And then when there is less data, there is more ambiguity, and when there is more ambiguity, a state cannot formulate a policy. So a state cannot highlight a problem itself, and then even if you highlight a problem, you do not have enough data to locate the problem and then allocate funds and efforts on those areas. So literacy rates in Pakistan have increased over time, but they are not translated in a sense that it's not that only how much people, how much students, how much kids have entered the school. It's about how much successful they have become acquiring that education. So these data only reflect the entry to the school. They only reflect the provincial data. They only reflect this. These stats do not reflect the outcomes of that education. And with regards to minorities, there is hardly any data available in Pakistan. So how do we convert this access into outcomes, better outcomes? This data is less known. So this data must be visible. There's no visibility of that data with regards to minorities. That even if they are entering the school, if they are getting out of the school and they are being labeled as educated, how is that transforming their lives? So minority lives matters most. So these datafication often hides actual outcomes, and when outcomes are hidden, there's less focus on the policy making, and then there are areas that require more attention and they are given less attention, and this converts into social disparity and inequitable allocation of resources. So there's a lot of problems. So our constitution in Pakistan protects individual rights, protects religious rights, and Article 25A actually states that state wants education for all. There has to be an inclusivity, but that inclusivity has to be translated at grassroots level to a point where you can measure the outcomes So these types of outcomes are not available. They are less visible. They are hidden because the size of the minority population is somewhere around 2%. So it is manageable in a state that is so security oriented, that is so where there is national security that matters the most. These types of data are hidden and they do not reflect as much as they are reflected in India, because there is a much larger size of minorities, and there are minority groups, and because Indian Constitution also at least takes care of this inclusivity of all with regards to education and freedom of expression and equality before the law. Same has happened in Pakistan, but its impacts are not known because of the size of the population. Our in our side of the subcontinent, we have had a fair share of minority problems, but they are managed in a sense that our narratives transformed quite drastically. We So during the 80s, we used the Islamization policies so much that for the 2 decades we had to get out of it, and then there came a time of Musharraf era when education was when education emergency was launched, and the national identity converted into security matters of the state. So there was a considerable shift from religification of the society to liberalization of the society during the Musharraf era. During that time, India has taken a shift towards religification to a point where one dominant party decides that how the social outlook should be in India, and what would happen with the minorities, and the identities are merged. These types of problems emerge in a longer run, and those problems are intensely hidden by the state because they cannot manage that much of an extent. So the coercive nature of the state is quite visible. Dr. Goldy has rightly suggested that India is turning into a fascist. There are more fascist tendencies in India than before, and I cannot agree more on this, because Pakistan has taken the same path, and we have turned our country upside down, because during the 1960s we were quite a Asian tiger, and now it has come to a point where we cannot locate our GDP growth rate because it is so varied that we cannot even say that this is where it is standing right now. So it is so fluctuating. So there are social effects that go beyond school. So out of the school children in Pakistan are roughly around 28%, and among those 28%, there is no data that suggests that how many minority children are out of school. So there might be so this inclusivity has to, because there are 2-3% of the minorities. So this type of data is not gathered. So our literacy data is gathered upon regional lines, upon provincial lines, and urban-rural lines, but it is not collected on. If it is collected, it is not projected in the policies as well. So when there are instances of giving better opportunities, better educational opportunities, better social opportunities to the minorities, there is they might be less informed, because when you make a policy that is not based on data, you might be allocating funds and resources to a place where it is less needed, and it becomes so universal that equitable allocation of resources is not possible. So this is what the basic problem is with Pakistan, is that state responses from protection to inclusion, they happen. Our constitution helps in that way. There are certain measures, there are certain scholarships that are there. There's a certain inclusivity in the curriculum as well. Where I agree that there are certain dominant areas where Islam is professed more, but there are certain areas where our constitution represents an inclusive curriculum and teacher support. So there are certain areas that need to be worked upon, because I, as a teacher at a university setting, we know how many minority students are there in our class. But the focus, as Dr. Goldy rightly referred to Paulo Freire's readings, Wretched of the Earth. When we read these kind of texts, they're not reflected in our education system as well. So our classroom setting has to be more inclusive. Our curriculum has to be more inclusive. So equal treatment must produce equal capabilities. And because of less data available on to measure the equal that we are equipping our students with the equal capabilities, there are less chances. There can be a debate on that, but we cannot reach to a right policy measures to be taken. So Pakistan shows two realities. There is a progress in education, but the continuing question should be that is there an equitable inclusion? So the next step is to ensure that educational opportunity become visible, measurable, and accessible for all communities. And this is where I would take a leaf from this webinar by suggesting that these two realities have to combine in a sense that they make one reality where everything is comprehensible, where progress is not equated with numbers of children admitted in the school and the number of students getting out of the school. It is a whole sum of social inclusion that requires state attention to a level where they can measure data. That out of the school children who are minorities, how much they are reflected in our social progress. Are they socially progressing? Is there equitable opportunity available for them? And how state not only protects their rights but also helps them with the way Dr. Goldy has suggested, that the way he showed in a picture that everybody should have. He quoted Albert Einstein quite rightly that every person, every national, every citizen should have a same equitable allocation of resources, and this is only possible when state policies are projected in that way. Whether it's India or Pakistan, whether it's a short size of minority and whether there's a bigger minority available in India, these outcomes have to be measured in a sense that we can make a policy, make an informed policy on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Usman, for sharing this policy-oriented issues and your very good insights for our team today. So I know Dr. George is in a hurry, but I would be requesting him to stay a bit briefer because I have two follow-up questions for him. If you struggle listening me, I have already pasted here as well, so that you can read out. So, I mean, if you can see, that's okay, or I can read out these questions to you.
So basically, what I was trying to bring in was like how how education is being instrumental in creating a new narrative. How education is being instrumental in creating a new narrative, and how that narrative is becoming mainstreamized in the current India. How that narrative is becoming it is becoming the national narrative. It is not really the national narrative, but it is being transformed into a national narrative. So I was trying to look at how discrimination creates exclusion of minorities, exclusion of oppressed people, exclusion of marginalized people. I was looking at how it creates economic inequality and marginalization, and how it creates psychological and cultural threats. And I was also looking at how this whole system is then impacted. I was looking at how this whole system is impacted because of a fascist agenda of the current regime. And so I also tried to mention what are the challenges that we face. It's a lot of hate, a lot of false narratives, a lot of politicized justice, a lot of majoritarian nationalism. Now, what needs to be done? I'm going to look at the first question. There is a lot that one could do if there is something called a civil society in existence. So what has happened is that now one of the major victims of this entire proceedings has been the civil society organizations. And the civil society organizations, they have been reduced. Actually, if you look at the way it has moved over the last 10 to 12, 13 years, There has been a large number of civil society organizations that has been wiped off the surface itself. So when you talk about civil liberties, when you talk about human rights, when you talk about things that impact the ordinary person of this society, that sort of a thing is completely missing at in the present context. You don't see such a thing that is there. So one major problem is that, do we really have a civil society in India in the present context? So unless you have such a civil society, it is not very easy. And what has been happened is, any organization working on human rights, on SC rights, on ST rights, on women's rights, on religious minority rights, all have been targeted one after the other. You might have heard the case of people like Tista Siddiqui. You might have heard of the case of organizations like PUCL, People's Union for Civil Liberties. You might have heard how many of the civil rights activists were thrown into the jail, and they've been languishing in jail for several years. Young people. So the whole civil society movement, that was also part of the major strategy, that was being disrupted. That was completely blocked. Their support, their funding, their FCRA, everything was blocked by one after another. Yet, I do not say like there is no civil society organization in at present. But what has happened is, they are already battling civil rights questions, the questions of human rights in a big way. Now, what could be done? I'm just trying to say how this could be addressed, thereby to mitigate the attacks on education and institutions. There can be a lot of the possibilities. If there is a proactive government, we can also engage in policy reforms, policy advocacy. Like the government, we can put in the checks and balances on the government. In fact, the government must strictly enforce the constitutional protections. That is not been implemented. Now, what is happening through this new education policy? They're actually they're actually upholding what they have created through these policies, instead of protecting the rights as per the constitution. Now, that's one of the key things. And now, when you look at the other part, there is a lot of hate speech within educational institutions. There's a lot of false narrative in educational institutions. Now, and there are people who, like, education itself is becoming a false narrative. Education itself is becoming discriminatory, not only against SC and STs, but also against the women and minorities at large. The citizenship laws are actually being used as a tool to attack the minority population of this country. Now, what needs to be done as a policy reform? The government must enforce the constitutional protection to uphold the SC, ST, OBC, minority, women, and they should hold accountable all the perpetrators of hate crime, hate speech. They should be accountable of people who simply go and attack the churches, the worship places. They should be accountable of those who they should bring them to the court of law. They should be brought under the grip of law. Those who go and attack the Muslims under the grab of love jihad, under the grab of cow vigilante groups. So under the pretext of beef eating, they should bring people they should make them, even if people even if there is a love jihad that's happening. Let us assume, let's say there is love jihad happening in a simple one or two cases that is happening. The public do not have a right to punish the person, even if that is a. But as per the constitution, there is no love jihad which is described or prescribed as a crime. It is a crime. If you put it as a crime, it is a crime under the anti-conversion law. So bring that person under the anti-conversion law, instead of the Hindu mob going and lynching them, killing them. So that's the policy. All discriminatory laws should be repealed. A lot of discriminatory law that should be repealed. Second is, education should be made inclusive. Revise the educational curriculum. Promote, pluralism. Promote religious pluralism. Promote religious tolerance. Promote the real, true history instead of the false narratives. Promote, representation of people from different sections and communities. Third, I would say there is a need for orientation of the existing NGOs, the non-governmental organization, and the civil society spaces, because there is no community initiative. There has to be community initiatives, and the community should take real initiative to document discrimination. They should prevent and stop, excessive bulldozing of ideologies, excessive bulldozing of these kind of aspects through their own networks, the social media networks run by RSS, the Sangha Parivar and its affiliates. Then there should be local fencing that should happen to protect the minorities, to protect the rights of the discriminated and the marginalized sections. Now, more than that, there is a need for international, monitoring. The legal frameworks like the US CIRF, the legal frameworks like the UN minority rights groups, the special rapporteurs on minority rights from the United Nations. These all should be activated to monitor hate crimes, the abuses by the state and the private parties, private actors, the vigilante groups, the Bajrang Dalis, and the state should be held accountable because the state is allowing this to happen, and this should be brought into the international and global stage. So there are four, tangible, solution, actionable solutions I mentioned. Now, the judiciary and legislative institutions, they can contribute to protect the education and ensure legal accountability in such cases. See, you need to look at a fascist state. Any fascist state, in any fascist state across the globe, what has happened and what is happening at present in the United Nations is something very similar. What has happened in, you look at the history of any fascist state, in the fascist state, they will not allow the judicial and legislative independence. The judiciary will not be free to bring in legal promulgations and laws which is free from the impact of the fascist ideology. So, and they will fix the judiciary. They will put people in the judicial spaces. They will put only those people who would come in support of their ideology. And that is what has happened in India also. And that is a tragic thing that has happened in India. So we cannot help with the judiciary and legislature at the moment, but we can definitely create pressure groups and pressure building from different sections, from within the country, from with our neighbors, and from the international, crowd that can help us to create more cohesive force and pressure against human rights violations and against the distortion of education, against the over application, and against the way it has adversely impacted the religious minorities in India. And I think this also would be the case of Pakistan. I think this also would be the case to a certain extent of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is really reeling in a big crisis right now. There's also a lot of similar cases that you will find in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, and in many of the Asian countries. You'll find similar cases. So I rest my case, and if there are more questions, I would always welcome to answer you. And once again, thank Furqan and Salim and my brother Usman. I thank all of one and all who are present here. If there are more questions, please come up with it. I would really be happy to address.
Thank you. Thank you
So,
so much, Dr. George. Yeah, Usman.
I have a small observation I mean, we being the similar, we sharing the same past as society. There's a gradual understanding that is developing in my mind that because I have lots of Hindu friends from India when I was a Commonwealth scholar, and the way they used to reflect on India prior to 2014. I was wondering that
Yeah.
how come in a country like India, which is the biggest democracy in the world, and because I know a lot of my friends are Hindus from India, and how has it happened that it has come to a point where this cow vigilantism has turned so bad, and then there is you cannot name your shop to a Muslim name, and there are lots of other issues that are happening. I mean, this love jihad angle started somewhere around 2014 and 15. And how this has taken shape with quite a strategy, and it is quite appalling because the countries like India somehow they direct us on the same lines. So our experiment with majoritarian rule in Pakistan has not turned up really well, and we have learned our lessons with it. And Pakistani law is more Pakistani law as it is represented in Indian law. They are more inclusive in nature. I mean, Indian constitution is more liberal than compared to Pakistan. But but how has it come, and how will it? I mean, I'm in shock to hear what you have just mentioned, Dr. George, because I don't see a country with so much potential and with so big population surviving this in a right way. Are there, and since you are suggesting that there's a lot of persecution against NGOs, so there's less civil society who is voicing in that direction, and then there are certain NGOs that promote Hindu nationalism in India. They are given more voices, and they are given more choices to present their case. So how is it possible? I mean, there must be voices, but do you see when you reflect on it, do you see a gray area where there is a possible chance of survival and getting out of it?
See, I need to bring in this point at this moment that yes, you are right. India is the largest gun democracy. Yes, you are right. There is a kind of diverse communities who have been living, in coexistence, who have been living together. There has been peaceful coexistence. Even today, there are many cases where you could see that people are very supportive for each other. It's not that you don't have such case studies now where Muslims support the Hindus and the Hindus support the Muslim. There are case studies even these days. Such case studies are there. But what has happened is that the quantity, the number has squeezed to very few case studies now. Earlier, in many places, that was a common thing. Now, I also want to tell you one more thing. See, there are parallel things that has happened. Historically, India has been I mean, much before we become India and you become Pakistan, it was basically a land uh, where there was no actual law. The law
Yes,
was basically
that's the
decided only by the dominant.
group.
So
Good.
whether it was the medieval period, if you look at the pre-medieval period, even I want to bring in the post-Buddhist phase. If you look at that phase, systematically Buddha and Ashoka were tried to be always replaced in this phase. So there was always a methodological pattern of replacing Buddha and replacing Ashoka. So that methodological pattern eventually led to the consolidation and, in a way, the writing of many scriptures. I can tell you very strongly with very solid with a lot of evidences from the past that the almost all Hindu scriptures were written after the Mauryan Empire. Though they claim 3,000 years, some of them they claim the Rig Veda was written around 1700 BCE. No, honestly, no. BCE to like around 400, 500, 600 CE. So we need to understand. I'm not sure whether I'm audible because there's a lot of, it's raining here, so probably there would be some disturbances in the audio or video. Kindly bear with me. So probably we need to understand first that this is not the true truth that India has been always like a good. India's the kind of golden age being purported by the Brahminical Hindutva is not actually the golden age. The golden age was there when Buddha challenged the Brahminical structure, and he brings in a structure of equality. He brings in people like he brings in people like Sumit, and brings in Angulimala and all into his sangha. So it's like a headhunting tribe. Other Sumit is like a kind of a scavenger. So you can see a scavenger becoming part of the sangha. You can see the women becoming part of the sangha. You can see a hunting tribe becoming a body hunting tribe becoming part of the sangha, and that equilibrium was created by Buddha. And since then, Brahmanism was still looking for opportunities to have a resurgence. And despite in history, you can see Brahmanism has survived that history. Despite all the difficulties that it has faced, it has survived the history. What we can see that there's a subtle pattern that has been already in place. Even when the Muslim rulers came, I mean, they were the first ones to have opened the corridors of, the gates of the palace for the untouchable people. They were the first ones who have done that. Now, what has happened is that despite that, there was a great section of a good section of upper caste people who entered into the Islamic fraternity, and then they started doing the same domination what they have been doing while they were still Hindus. So the story goes into the same pattern. What I'm trying to say is that the pattern has remained in some method or form. That has remained in the documented form. That has remained in the practical form. You can see how zamindari become very official in the pre-British era. So it was not that just there was a question between Hindus and Muslims. There was a question within Hindus and Hindus. There's a question within Muslims and Muslims. I don't want to go into those details. Probably you might be knowing it. So like the Pasmanda Muslims in India, for instance, I am sure there are the similar group of people over there in Pakistan also. There are similar groups within other countries also. So what I'm trying to say that it has a history, it has a long history that needs to be understood. Now, when that history comes down, there are two things that is happening. Initially, the Hindus, because of their hunger for power, they always consider the Muslims as a dushman, as an enemy. So that animosity remained very strongly even during the British period. So that animosity you could see in books like Anand Math, written by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Sorry, I'm taking too much of time. So you can see how that was systematically built in. When Savarkar writes Essentials of Hindutva, when he brings in two core elements of Pitta Bhu and Punya Bhu, he also says that we have strong, dushman, we have strong enemies in present. We have strong enemies around us. Number one, Muslims. Number two, Christians. Number three, communists. Three enemies. And in fact, when Goldwater takes over, he uses the same language, three enemies. In the book, We and Our Nationhood Defined, he's using the same language. So, We and Our Nationhood Defined, he's using the same language, three core enemies of Hindus. So now, Hindutva becomes Hindus, and Hindu become Hindu culture, Sanskriti, Hindustan, Hindi Bhasha. So that is basically, so that has over the years not been reduced. There are efforts to struggle back. There were efforts by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. There are efforts by people like Periyar. There are efforts by I.M. Kali. There are efforts by Swami Srinarayana Guru Swami. There are efforts by the pre-independence period. There were efforts by Mahatma Phule. There were efforts by Savitribai Phule. But
yes, that seems quite right. That seems quite right. Because I think that the decolonization process in India was hijacked in between. So the so it took a different angle. We do not consider being in Pakistan. We do not look at it with that angle. But with India, I think it's more like a different pattern of decolonization that was hijacked by the Hindu elite and then translated into policies and practices of such kind that it creates a hysteria and with such vast discrimination with minorities, it becomes always a tool for oppression and forced consent. So that is what has happened. I think you're quite right about it. Thank you very much.
No, the simplest thing is that Baba Sahib Ambedkar's dream project was annihilation of caste. That was his dream project. That was his lifetime project.
Yes.
And what has happened in the post-independent India is actually the diametrically opposite that has happened. It has been the consolidation of caste. So that's where, it is not something which has suddenly happened. The consolidation of caste was assimilated into the Hindutva project. So you can see how
that one thing I think that happened really great with India post-partition was the land reforms. But uski jo the social dimension of that with regards to the caste system is still an unfulfilled agenda of that realm. So I think that I hope I really like India being a country because of the past that we share so much that is there which we share. And I would really want an India that is more inclusive. I hope it happens, inshallah.
So I'll just sign out. I'll just finish one with it. So what I'm trying to say is that there has been strategic, methods that they have applied. Right from 60s, they were creating, opportunities for people from the Sangha Parivar to enter into Indian administrative service, Indian police service, and they carried it forward. So 60s, they began an academy in Nagpur to basically to train young people whom they wanted to be sent as civil service, people. So they started it. So they started the school chain of Saraswati Shishu Mandir. They started the school chain to bring tribals under their fold. They started institutions, philanthropic institutions. They engaged in all different areas of human society under the pretext of cultural engagement. And they enter into governance. So now it is not as the question asked by brother Furqan, is it possible? How is it possible to engage with the judiciary? No, it's very difficult because they've already planted people in there. So the planting has happened over the last 6-7 decades. It's not something which has happened instantly. So the consolidation of caste actually emerged into a larger Hindutva project. And the only point where it was contested was by Dalit movements and Adivasi movements. In fact, even the minority, may it be Muslim, may it be Christian in this country, they did not contest it. They did not actually contest this consolidation of caste and assimilation of consolidation into a Hindu project. That was never contested by Muslims and Christians. It was the Dalits and Adivasis and to some extent the women. Not entirely, but to some extent the women.
Yes.
So yes,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope I still will be trying my level best to be audible. Thank you so much, Dr. George and Usman, for your invaluable insights and your contributions to today's discourse. I'm sure that, and I hope this discussion had shed light on both challenges faced by religious minorities and pathways towards more inclusive society as prescribed by both of our distinguished speakers. And we hope today's webinar stimulates further research, dialogue, and action in promoting social justice, educational equality, and minority rights across South Asia and at a global level as well. On behalf of SARIM, I sincerely thank both of our speakers and to those who are watching and listening and for joining us today. And we look forward to your continued engagement in future initiatives. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful